Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are going to talk about engine protection, which to me is probably the best reason to buy a standalone for your race car. While we can run most of them on the stock ECU that it may have been equipped with from the factory, standalones are capable of protecting the biggest investment in the race car, which is typically the engine. Whether it has to do with coolant temp, oil pressure, air fuel. Obviously, we talk about stuff like knock control. The ability for an ECU to do safety measures to keep from damaging that engine will save you thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the engine and how much you race in a season. So let's look at some examples of things that you could set up. We're going to open the Infinity software. We're going to actually look at the tune for my car with a data log. So in this particular ECU, you have a couple different options, and we'll look up the setup a little bit. Coolant temp protection, something that I do that maybe not everybody does, is even on street cars, right there, I try to let them warm up. I want them to be ready to race before you actually try to race them. So going out on a cold motor with low coolant temp or low oil temp, bad idea. Now sometimes we have to make some adjustments to this because maybe the car sits in the pits. Obviously you have to have some heat in the motor, the fabulous joke from World Cup this year. But coolant temp is typically far less important than oil temp. So what you'll see is I have a break at 140 degrees to 145 degrees where all of a sudden I'm going to let this run up to 9700. This particular case, that's not what my rev limits are set at. You can see that down here. It's actually set at 94, 95. But that gives me the ability to bump it easy and not run into this, because this will also work as a main rev limiter in case you forget. At 212 degrees, not necessarily my favorite, but I know it's not going to damage anything. 215, I start a rev limiter at 4,000. 218, I start it's down to 1,000. Car gets to 220, it's just going to turn off. You can see something very similar with the oil temps. Now, I obviously prefer to have the oil temp as hot as possible, 150 plus, usually within 20 degrees of coolant if possible. But because of how races tend to go, I know that sometimes I'm going to get by with 130. Just all it's going to have. Not what I want, but what I got to deal with. So if we are to look here, similar idea, 4,000, then at 130 it goes to full. Now you can run your oil temp typically way higher. I don't see a need in my particular car, so 231 I start to drop it down, 232 I drop it down half, 235 it turns off. The big important one, oil pressure. You can go around a corner and starve the engine. You can accelerate too fast and starve the engine. So having this as close as you can run it safely is important. Now you'll see my oil pressure right here at 7,400 is 98 pounds. So I really could probably bring this up to 80. If it's below 80 at that RPM, it's also at full power. It should probably be higher. I had it at 60, but not necessarily where you want it. Afr protection, again, set this close, but you got to leave yourself a little leeway. This is gasoline scale, just because it's easier for me to think in. Normally I try to run a 9.2 or a 9.3 air fuel, so I set it at a 970. I had tested it on the dyno. The EGT didn't get too wacky, so it seems like a safe limit. Probably really should drop that and go a little bit richer, but hasn't damaged anything yet, so I've been getting by. Now, if we go to the wizard and go to setup, there's a tab for engine protection. This is very, very important to remember to turn on, because you can populate the table, but nothing happens. This is where you could, if you want, if any of these come on, you will get a check engine light. So it means, hey, dummy, look at your log, figure out why. Latch and hold. You can make it stay stuck on. You can use that to affect other things like boost. Basically, you can make it where it will only run wastegate line if the check engine light's on. Some fancy table setup, but I can show you how that works. Activate engine light or check engine light when engine protect out is active. So you can run all that if you want. Max boost. In this case, I don't care if I run 5 bar. The overboost target variation, for me, if I run over, I'm on methanol, I'm not worried about it. If it was a pump gas car, this might get set to 30 kPa. So if I targeted 250 and it went to 280, it's going to boost cut regardless of what this is. Something important to think about setting up. Throttle position reset. That means I have to be under 30% throttle for the car to turn back on. Otherwise, all of those conditions are on. There's no fuel. The car has shut down. We get to the oil pressure protection. Obviously, remember, turn it on. Minimum run time, at least a second in this case, 1,000 milliseconds. Activation delay, I have it at 1.5 seconds. That is probably too long, pardon me. So you probably want to set that a little bit closer, depending on how steady your oil pressure is. Mine's very steady, so I can get by doing it. It's not a big deal. Rev limit, it'll drop to 3,000. So again, fuel cut till it's at 3,000. We get to the lean protection stuff. You can turn on the lambda table, which is this one right here. And like anything else, what you click is what's on. Then you can decide what it's going to do. Is it going to fuel cut? Is it going to spark cut? Are you going to have it do both? How long does it have to run? Where does that protection start? In this case, above 20% throttle. It can run that lean for 500 milliseconds or a half second in this case, and then it goes to the 3,000 RPM rev limit until you reset the throttle or it richens back up. So if we go to the tuning tab real quick, you can see my oil pressure and oil temps. Over here, this particular example, it's 133 degrees. This was on the dyno, 170 degree coolant temp. It was a little bit lean, but that didn't come on for some reason. And then all of a sudden we get rich right in here. Oh, it's because it's 5 pounds of boost. So the area was allowing it to do that. So that's an important thing to look at because I just learned something new with you guys today. So it was 150 kPa. It's only right here. I'll let it run a 1250 at that. Maybe not what I should be doing. Maybe I should make that a 9.7. Maybe I should make these 9.5. Get it a little closer. See, that's the great thing about going through and doing these videos. I learn just as much as you guys do. Things I miss in logs. So, anyway, that sums up engine protection. Kind of shows some of the basics. You have to have sensors. Obviously, you have to have an oil pressure sensor somewhere in the oil stream. You can do fuel pressure as well. Use that for fuel pressure differential calculations. You can run a coolant pressure sensor. You can run an oil temp sensor. And then I said I was going to show you how you could run things. So you can make this axis the check engine light. In this case, what I did is if the coolant pressure is higher than I want, it's going to change to the boost target. And then because of how I had the variation from boost target, if my coolant pressure goes too high, it's going to take 7 bar out of the total boost target in use, which might be 400 kPa. So it's going to drop it all the way down. I am at that point over my boost target by 2 bar. And it goes into boost cut, turns the motor off. Hopefully, if I lost a head gasket, it would save things. It would keep it from getting out of control. Maybe this number actually needs to be 20. Whatever, based on RPM. So, interesting tricks. You can repurpose stuff if you're bored enough to sit down and think about how to do it. So, While they might not necessarily have it in your version of the firmware, I believe they do now. Under inputs, you can go set up coolant pressure, but I don't think there's an actual coolant pressure safety, so you have to, yeah, there's a coolant pressure. You gotta be creative in how you do it. Anyway, guys, hope you're all doing well. If you like this content, please consider subscribing if you haven't. If you have friends that might like it, or somebody in your motorsports group, please consider sharing it with them. If you did like it, give me a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give me a thumbs down, and give me an idea of what content you would like to see instead. If you need notified as new content is added, simply click the bell icon and YouTube will do that for you. Okay, guys, take care.